Welcome. Got another streamer pattern we're going to tie up today. This is called the Black Ghost Marabou, and it's a variation of a very traditional streamer pattern called the Black Ghost. The Black Ghost was originated by Herbert Welch a number of years ago, mostly up in the Rangley region in northeast United States, fishing for landlocked salmon, brook trout, and various other species up there. Like I said, this is a variation. Instead of a matched saddle wing on this, we're just going to use Marabou. The Marabou version has been used for many years for a number of different species. Here in the Midwest, I like to use it for large and smallmouth bass, simply because we don't have a whole lot of trout in this area, and certainly no landlocked salmon. If you're interested in more information about the Black Ghost and this particular fly, I suggest there was a book that came out a year ago called Herbert Welch, Black Ghosts and Art in a Maine Guide's Wilderness. It is an excellent book about various patterns that Mr. Welch created and fished back in the heyday or the grand day of the Rangley region, as well as the Black Ghost, how it's tied, why it's tied that way, and variations. So it's a good read. But in the meantime, we're going to go ahead and tie this fly, and we'll get started. We'll begin tying the Black Ghost Marabou by getting our hook in the vise. The hook that I'm using for this is a Fulling Mills FM 2220 in a size 4. You can use any long streamer hook, 4X to 5, 6X, something like that. Black Ghost has also been tied on real long streamer hooks, what many people call like Harry Stevens style 9X long streamer hooks. With the hook in the vise, I'm going to start by attaching, I've got a flat wax nylon here, and like the video that I did for the Black-Nosed Dace last week, this is used primarily to be able to get a base layer of thread quickly on the hook shank and then move from one end of the hook shank to the other fairly quickly. I'll then change to a smaller denier, a UTC 70 denier, to complete the wing, the false hackle, and the head of the fly. I'm going to advance the thread down to the point of the hook. At that point, I'm going to tie in my tail fibers. I am using Schlappen feathers for the tail fibers. You could use a regular rooster saddle hackle or a neck hackle if you wanted to. You could even use like a Chinese neck or something like that. It doesn't have to be anything specific, whatever you happen to have on hand. I'm going to get some of the barbs off the side of the feather. I'm going to bring them straight out perpendicular like this to even the tips up right here. I'm going to peel those off, collect those together. I'm going to tie those in so that the tail is going to be about half a shank length long. I'll set those up here and get a couple of wraps in like this, and that's just to get the tail secured. Next, I'm going to tie in our rib, and the rib for this is going to be a silver Mylar number 14 Danville. I'm going to bring this in up underneath the thread, slide it all the way around to the underside like this. This allows the thread to basically act as a third hand. I'll then draw this in so that it is somewhere in the body. There's not a lot to this body. We do want to minimize any bumps, so I'm going to leave that tinsel a little bit long, but I don't have to be too concerned about it. Our floss is going to go ahead and cover that up. I'm using a 4-strand Rayon floss for this. You can certainly use a silk floss if you want. If you're going to tie these on a smaller hook, say a 8, maybe even a 10, then you might want to only use 3 and or 2 of these strands of floss for the body. Seeing as this is a larger hook, I'm going to use all 4. Again, I'm going to bring this up underneath the thread. The thread is helping me as a third hand, and I'm going to bring this down somewhere inside the body, like that. I'm going to get a couple more wraps going down the hook shank like this. That gets the tail and the body all the way down the end of the hook shank. Now I'm going to start wrapping forward. I do want to keep my thread flat if I can, so occasionally I'm going to counterspin my bobbin to flatten that thread out. I don't have to put too much tension on it. I don't want the floss and the rest of the tail and or the tinsel rib to rotate around that. Again, I want to keep that body as smooth as I can. You may find that you have to trim a little bit of that body or tinsel off. That's fine. So as I get this up here closer to the end of the hook shank by the eye of the hook, I can see if I have to trim anything off. In this case, I do not. So once I'm up here, I've used the flat wax nylon for everything that I needed it for. It just helped me lay a nice base layer down here and then come back up pretty quick and get a nice smooth body. So I'm going to go ahead and change over to my Wapsi UTC 70 Denier thread. I'll attach that right behind the eye of the hook and just wrap back down the hook shank to trap that as well as secure the flat wax nylon, and then I can cut both of those off. Making certain to keep my thread inside what will end up being the head space right in here, I'm going to go ahead and start palmering forward the floss. Now, one thing you want to be careful of with the floss tied in here like this, all of these fibers are under tension going straight back. If I bring this straight up like this and start wrapping around, what you'll notice is that these fibers here are now under less tension than these fibers over here. So as you're wrapping forward, these fibers here will start to drift out in front of your wraps. To prevent this, what you want to do, that first wrap around, you're going to want to just stroke the floss a little bit out towards you at a little bit of an angle so that you get all those wraps under the same tension. Now as I wrap forward, I don't have to worry about those fibers spreading out. With my floss body completed, I'm going to go ahead and start palmering the rib forward. You'll notice that by tying it in with the gold side facing me, when I come around it'll flip over to the silver. It doesn't really matter how many wraps you put in as long as they're evenly spaced. I generally get anywhere from 6 to 8 turns as I work my way up the hook shank. At this point I'm going to tidy this area up right here. This will be where the head of the fly is going to be. Because we're tying in a marabou wing, the head won't be as big as, say, on a bucktail streamer. So I want to try and make certain that that doesn't grow too big there. At this point, I'm going to tie in the false hackle, or some people call that a beard. And again, I'm using some Schlappen fibers for this. If you want to see how I prepare this, take a look at the video I did on the Professor, and it goes into detail as to how to prepare the false hackle and the wing on that fly. I already have my false hackle fibers prepared. These are going to go down about halfway down the hook shank. They could go a little bit longer if you want. I'm going to do a pinch wrap underneath here and bring those right up to the hook shank. I'll put 2 or 3 wraps in to secure that, make certain that the false hackle is straight right on the underside of the hook shank, and then I'll cut away the waste. Again, I'm going to tidy this up. I'm going to wrap up to the eye of the hook, back just a little bit to secure that false hackle, and tidy that up so I have a nice platform for my wing. Black Ghost Marabou just uses a marabou plume, a white marabou plume for the wing on this. You want to prepare this. Some of these will flow a little bit better if you cut the tip section out. This particular feather is pretty limp, so I'm not going to worry about that. I like to wet these down a little bit just to keep them from flying away so much. It allows me to measure and tie this in a little bit easier. I tie mine with the wing going just about halfway down the tail. Some people like to tie them longer. The original Black Ghost that was tied by Herbert Welch actually had them even much longer. If you look in the book that I mentioned, you'll notice that some of them, the wings are very, very long. But I prefer to have mine just a little bit shorter. So I'll measure that so it goes about halfway down the tail. Hold it with my left hand, bring my thread up with a little pinch wrap, come around the top, make certain it's in position and not rolling on around the hook. Looks good on all sides. Then I'll go ahead and trim away the waste. You want to make certain you trim this right close to those thread wraps. Again, we want to minimize the size of our head here. If you want to paint eyes on the side of this, you could have a little bit wider profile head. With that trimmed off, I'm going to go ahead and come down to the eye of the hook and start creating the head of the fly. So the head of the fly is created to give it a nice finished look, as well as make certain that you're covering over the butt ends of any materials that you put in the fly. It all looks nice and neat. Make certain as you're tying this particular fly and you're finishing up the head of the fly to take a look at the back side that you can't see, because the marabou here, when you cut that off, has all kinds of wispy little ends that will stick out between your thread wraps. So you just want to make certain that you have all of those thread wraps complete and everything covered up. With that done, I'll put in a 4 or 5 turn whip finish. I'll put in my base coat of head cement, and I'm just putting, I don't want this to soak into the false hackle or into the wing, so I'm just making certain that I put a little bit right on the thread wraps. I'll let that soak in, and then if you prefer, you can use some hardest hull to get a nice gloss coat. It takes about 3 coats to do that. I'll refer you to the video I did on the black nose dace. It goes into detail in my process for doing that. So that's it. That is the Black Ghost Marabou. Actually a quick little fly if you want to get into tying streamer flies. Some of the classic streamer patterns. This one is a relatively easy one and simple one. You don't have matched or married wings to work with. It's just a little bit of marabou. Nice thing is it's also a very, very effective pattern. It was originally tied for landlocked salmon and trout. At the same time, it has worked very, very well for large and smallmouth bass. And I'm imagining even for rainbow trout or other types of trout, this would work very, very well. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this video and not only learned a new pattern, but maybe learned some new techniques and a few new skills. If you like this video, please hit that thumbs up button below. You can support Dressed Irons by hitting the subscribe button, and don't forget to hit the bell icon so you get notified when new videos are published. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. Until next time, remember, it's fly tying. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong.